Podcasting from a little cabin on a hill, this is the Stacy Westfall Podcast. Stacy's goal is simple: to teach you to understand why horses do what they do, as well as the action steps for creating clear, confident communication with your horses.
Hi, I'm Stacy Westfall.
And I'm Ginny Telego, and we are coming at you live from the Loko Bean in Loudonville, Ohio.
Welcome to episode 50 of the podcast. In this special edition, I wanted to invite you into our conversation over coffee and tea. You're a tea drinker.
I am. No coffee for me. You have been really busy with doing your Western dressage thing, and I've been busy traveling and building a house after my fire and all of that
Going
stuff.
back to school.
Oh, yeah, and starting grad school, because apparently I had an extra 5 minutes somewhere.
Yes.
Somewhere. I'm curious, how do you balance your work and home? Because, Jesse's also in the horse industry, and he's traveling, doing things for his work. So how do you balance that out, that you still are working towards your goals and putting in the time you need to and for your business, but make time for your family?
Can you define balance for me?
Well,
this is like a trick question.
When you find that, you're going to be a millionaire. But
Yeah.
what works for you, though? Because what works for you is going to be different than what might work for me.
Yeah, I honestly think the balance question is a little bit of I think it's the trick there. I think it's the what other words could we put in there aside from balance? Because I know the answer I want to give is that I want seasons in my life. That's how I view it. So I view moments at balance, but I don't really view the whole thing as balance. So what I've noticed I do, and I think that's why every time we have a conversation, I always grab a word from you. Have you noticed that I'm always like, that's the word I'm going to take away?
Yeah, you do, and you write it down.
Yeah, I'm really big on words. And so what I realize that I do a lot of times when I think about, if I'm just pondering a question like that, is that I'll start swapping out the word balance for a bunch of different words until I figure out something that leads me somewhere else. And the first thing that comes to mind is seasons, and just the idea that I almost if you want to say, be out of balance. But I know that right now it's the fall, and I can feel that winding down tiredness. And I question whether or not I could schedule my life different, that I wouldn't have it. But then I look back and I think I've always had that. When the sun is shining and it's cold and crisp out, I want to lay down in the grass. This is very specific. I want to lay down in the grass. I want to smell the grass and the earth, and I want to just fall asleep and have a nap in the sun. Yeah. But I've always wanted that as long as I can remember. Every fall that I can think of. So why am I fighting this? Why am I trying to think that isn't this just one of the seasons, and this transitions into the winter season, and the winter season means different things to me than the spring season. So I don't think I'm answering the question at all, but
it's funny because I agree. I don't think there is an answer to that. I hear people say that all the time. They're like, "Oh, I'm trying to find a work-life balance." I mean, there's books out there and blogs and workshops and all these things for people to go to that are supposed to help you, with this work-life balance. But life is so uncertain every day, every moment. And so you might have quote-unquote balance in this moment, but 5 minutes from now, it could get thrown off.
Yeah.
So I think it's more about adapting, and I like your way of looking at it of, there's different seasons, and you're always just moving from one into the next, and looking at it from the perspective of, okay, so this is where it's at right now. Right now, I need to maybe be putting more time and effort into my work. Right? You had this huge goal this year for going to the Western Dressage World Show, and so you knew that there were going to be times, and your family was aware of this because they know you're very driven, right? And so,
another word,
right? But there were times, I'm sure, where because that was a goal for you, that that was something where you needed to have more of yourself as opposed to with your family. But you also had times where, you've had a lot of transitions going on with your sons of, moving out and getting on their own. And so there's been times where that needed to be the priority, And so I don't think there is a like solution of how to have balance. I think it's more in your mindset about it.
When you were saying that, it actually made me laugh because I'm thinking, geez, my one view of life that seems to be the most all-encompassing is when I think about the horses. And I think when I see people get in trouble with horses is when they want balance every day.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's a great analogy.
They're like, I want to go out and I want to have this perfect ride every single day. And I'm like, okay, we have to talk about this. And so maybe what I need to do is like look at my whole life and that idea of balance. Like, I don't crave this perfectly balanced thing. So yesterday, actually last week when I came home from the World Show and I was riding, I was laughing because I told Jesse, I said, if people were watching me, they'd think I've lost my mind. Like, I just went out there. I was fairly successful across the board and won 2 of the classes. And I came home and I take them back into snaffle bits. I take them back into no spurs. And I basically, for lack of a better, like I tore everything apart all the way down. It's sort of like I've just been reading this book and I've been cleaning that whole Marie Kondo way where you like take everything out of the closet. Like you're not allowed to leave a single thing in the closet. Right. You take all of it out so you can look at it. And that's basically what I did with the horses. But I also recognize that I'm comfortable, that it's like, I've heard the analogy that if you look at training a horse a little bit like building a car, well, you shouldn't take it apart if you don't know how the pieces fit together.
Right. True story. And you're always worried. Like my husband does that, and I'm always worried. Like that there's like one nut somewhere, and I think that seems like that was probably really important. Right. And I think that's what happens with the horses.
So I think with the horses, like my comfort zone of understanding how it's been put together, but I also understand like I have to deconstruct it all. So like I've decided instead of puzzle pieces, my new favorite analogy is Legos. I've spent
Legos
years.
Are good. Legos are fun.
I've spent years stepping on Legos. I've been crippled by Legos. But it's almost like, so with my horses, I've been taking all these pieces and I've built the best. I built the best thing I could going to the World Show.
Right.
And it's constructed. It's 12 inches high and it's whatever and it's the shape it is.
Yeah.
But when I go home, if I want better next year, I have to take it all apart. I have to totally deconstruct the whole thing.
Right.
And I think that's where, when you have this idea of balance, you would not want to take anything apart.
You're right.
You would not want to return back to like, like I have this, I'm noticing your pad of paper here. And, I was at TJ Maxx the other day and I had bought this one journal made by a company called Fringe.
Okay.
And I bought one at TJ Maxx a while ago and I love it. So I'm in there like hoarder buying like all of the Fringe journals I can find.
Like what's different about that?
Writes really smooth. It's like something about the paper and the pen and the way they write.
Does it come with its own pen?
Like, no.
Oh, okay.
No, but I do have a favorite pen or two.
Oh yeah, well I do too. Yeah, I do too. I stalk people if they borrow my pen. I stalk them. It's a true story.
But it's like I get torn with those pieces of paper. I actually love the yellow journal pads. Like I don't have an attachment to the journal pads, so I can write on them, rip it off, throw it away.
Yeah.
But these journals that I have that are nice, I'm very protective of how I write in it, and I'm very neat with it, and it serves a purpose, but it is not as beneficial for me at times as when I'm like using one of those ugly legal pads that I can just I can put it out there and I can do everything and I can work all this messy stuff out, and then I use my other journal the other way.
Yeah. So that's interesting. So you balance out how you sort of manage or keep track of some of your thoughts as well. Like you have the journal is for one, certain type of thinking process that you're having, and then you have the plain old legal pad for something else. And so there's times where the journal might require more of your time, and there's other times where the plain old legal pad might have more of your time. And I think it just comes back to this sort of this misnomer about what balance is.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, we talk about that a lot when you and I are like, well, you know, I'm trying to figure out how do I balance out the time for this and the time for this, and then and then I need to write a blog, and then I need to do a podcast, and I need to do this and that, you know, because we're trying to figure out how do we grow our business, but how do we still keep doing things that we want to do and enjoy doing, and and then we have family.
Yeah, or in your case, your house burns down.
Right.
Hello.
Yeah, so having to balance. Talk about being thrown off balance,
yeah.
right? And I think that's what I am, thinking of when I was saying earlier how, there's so much uncertainty all the time for us. And to me, it's been more important for me to develop the ability to regain my balance fairly quickly so that even when something uncertain happens, it doesn't completely throw me off, right? I mean, so I'm as we're talking, I'm thinking about it of like being on the horse, right, with no stirrups, and you're riding with no stirrups, and you have to be able to adjust yourself moment to moment, because with the horse's movement and depending on what your balance is, the stronger you get, right, as a rider, the easier it is for you to be able to adapt to whatever happens. Mm-hmm. So if the horse is going along and you're up there, with no stirrups and you're, trying to stay on, and the horse all of a sudden kind of veers one way or the other, if you haven't developed the ability to quickly regain your balance, mm-hmm. then obviously it could be something that isn't as productive, like you just slide off the side of the horse, But if you develop the skill to be able to be okay with knowing that at some point in time the horse could veer off one way or the other or stop suddenly or whatever, and it's not going to throw you mm-hmm. off.
Yeah, or now there's two thoughts that popped into my head while you were talking. One was, I think maybe, is this a good time to mention that we're recording in a coffee shop?
Yeah, we're at Loko Bean in Loudonville. We're so appreciative of them letting us be here.
But the two things that occurred to me during that were, number one, like how much of this conversation I think we keep bringing to words in a physical sense, but I think it's mostly mental.
Definitely,
the balance you're talking about, when I hear it anyway, the balance you're talking about is a mental balance.
Absolutely.
Because a physical balance is a great analogy, but when your house burned down, like, your house is gone. Like, the physical world is totally disrupted, but the challenge for you, I'm going to guess, is there's a huge mental, is that not where it's taking place? Is this not the balance we're talking about?
I think it's absolutely the balance we're talking about. And so being able to develop the mental capacity and the emotional resilience to be able to adapt to uncertainty, I mean, without a doubt, losing my house and losing my dogs was, that was like being totally thrown off somewhere.
And that was recent.
Right, yeah, 6 months. Only 6 months ago. But because I've done a lot of self-development work, mm-hmm. because of the work I do, in my business, I think that played a big part, that I was able to kind of stop and look at the situation and figure out, okay, what do I need to do in order to help myself stay on a forward-thinking track? I have to acknowledge what happened. I have to acknowledge, the difficulty of that, the trauma of all of that. But then I have a business to continue doing, and I love the work I do. And so, being able to have the mental ability to adapt. I think that's what it keeps coming to my mind, is adaptability. So to me, it's not necessarily being able to balance, it's being able to adapt.
See, you finally replaced my word for me.
So there's
I got it out of you
now.
And so,
you're right. I had to work through that in my
and
extroverted processing way.
And I'm still working through it in the idea that the balance that I think people do look for is they look for the physical balance, because as you were sitting there using the analogy of balancing on the horse, I was actually thinking, I think the beauty of childhood for me was that I was given this little pony, and I couldn't saddle her, but I could get her near things and get on her.
Yeah.
And I could be running through the field, and she would stop suddenly to eat grass, and I would slide down her neck.
Yeah.
So when it becomes, and I will absolutely admit, sitting here in my mid-40s, that the idea of falling off a horse was way easier when you were 6.
Yeah, you
and
don't have
8
self-preservation
and 15,
at 6. Yeah.
When the idea was way easier. But I actually think that it's not the fear or the preventing of the falling off. It's knowing the falling off could come and going anyway.
Right.
You lost your dogs, and you had to, you chose to get another one. That's a huge risk. Yeah. Wait a minute.
2.
Oh, I've missed even more. Okay. You started grad school, and you started a house, and you travel all over the country, and you got another dog, and it's only been like 6 weeks since we had coffee last. So I'm an underachiever. This is what I hang out with. Well, okay, wait. You only had one. You only had Phoenix when.
Yeah. No, I got Roscoe first. Roscoe was the one I got back in May, and then I got Phoenix in June.
Okay,
So,
I got things flip flopped.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
But that's a huge risk there.
Absolutely.
That's that huge
very
risk.
big risk.
So that's what I mean. Like, my mom's going through it right now with her dog having cancer. He's 12. He's near the end of what you can Google for his regular lifespan anyway. Right. And it's like, but I think that back to the analogy of like falling off the horse or finding this perfect balance, if you wanted to totally avoid all that, you would have to not get another dog.
You're exactly right.
Totally avoid the
just
risk.
Thinking about that last week. I was just thinking about that because I was thinking about, the difficulty that I had in sort of opening myself up to the new dogs emotionally, and I thought, well, that's not fair to them, because they don't know. That's the great thing about the animals, right? Is they're totally clueless about anything that's happened. They don't know. They're just in the present moment. And but that was really good for me, because that was another place that I had to kind of look at my emotional reserves and think of, how do I adapt now to this situation, because I chose to bring these other two Aussies in to our world, and things are kind of chaotic because we're living in a mobile home that is very small. So 2 people and 2 Australian Shepherds and a cat now that is living in the house because it's winter. It's very cozy and very exciting sometimes in there. But yeah, I had to be willing to do that.
Yeah.
But for me, the thought of not having the dogs is far more uncomfortable for me than it was for me to open up myself to another dog. And that happens a lot. I know there's a lot of people that, when they lose a dog, especially if they've had it for a long time, and then they'll say, oh, I'm just not ready for another dog, because it's painful, and obviously in my situation of losing all 3 of my dogs in the fire, they were all young, and it was so unexpected and very traumatic for me, because I was the first one there and couldn't get them. And so, having to go through that grieving process, but then thinking to myself that, there's other dogs that I have the ability to rescue. So I had to find the balance. How do I adapt in my own emotional state to open up myself to bring in 2 other dogs, that needed homes. And so it just, it takes a lot of emotional resiliency. But I also had to really realize, and I think the fire definitely brought this home for me, I don't have any control over anything.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing, right? When we're talking about trying to find this balance between work and life, or even the ability to adapt to things. See, here's this whole brain thing that I am so excited about learning, because our brains want certainty. Our brains seek certainty. So uncertainty, anytime we're faced with uncertainty or even thinking about uncertainty, it makes us get all tense and nervous. And so we want to find a way to keep things certain, right? So we think if we somehow are able to control this work-life thing, that everything, then we don't ever have to worry about the uncertainty. But I'm just going to say uncertainty is certain. Is one thing you are guaranteed of in life. And so I just really think that for us, when you and I are talking about this, as entrepreneurs and having our own businesses, and we travel a lot, and also trying to maintain all of our relationships in our life, that really learning to adapt to the situation is much healthier emotionally for us than us trying to think we can control things and have quote-unquote balance.
Yeah. Openness is actually the word I'm grabbing out of this one.
Oh, that's a really good, You
used it several times there. And
you're welcome.
Thank you.
Let's see, that's two.
Openness. Openness is the one. Adaptability led to openness, but openness is the one I'm grabbing. Because that's the, all the way back to being a little kid. I remember somebody early on holding their hand shut and talking about, you can't receive and you can't give if your hand is closed. An open hand can give and can receive. But I think what's happening here is that a lot of times we're talking about negative emotions, opening up to risk of pain if you lose, something you love, or when you were talking and you talked about going through the grieving process. I remember writing an article. It must have been back in 2000 and around 2010 or 9 or something like that. Anyway, and I had, it was actually Willow's dad, and I'd shown him at the reining futurity. I made the finals, and I went in to run for the finals, and they always have you go in. You're down in Oklahoma. It says Gateway of Champions, like that's what you're running underneath, and like they always do a run-in pattern. So you're standing outside, and it says Gateway of Champions, and they've got all the music blaring, and you run down the tunnel, and it opens up into this huge coliseum full of people, and you run down in, and he and the first thing you do is a sliding stop and back up, and he did the sliding stop and started backing up, and he started to back a little bit crooked, and so I went to fix him. But this goes back to habits and how your habits.
Yeah, those things.
You make your habits, and then your habits make you. And so I was backing him up. Well, I ride young horses and older horses and problem horses and all this stuff. So he starts backing up, and if you can imagine, instead of backing straight, his head starts to go kind of left, which takes his hips to the right.
Yeah.
And I'm riding right-handed, and I reached up with my pinky finger, and I hooked the right rein for a brief second, because that would shorten that rein and bring him back around. I literally didn't even think about this. This is pure muscle memory. In the moment, needs to be straight, boom. Back up, do the rest of my run. I come out, and they say, score will be held for video review. By the way, this is not a good thing to hear.
Right.
And my husband, who's
uncertainty.
And my husband's like, what could have happened? Because he's standing, basically, he was standing like behind me, so he wouldn't have even been able to see it, because he wouldn't have been able to see my hand, but he could see all the other big things, like, and he knows none of the other big stuff that you can get disqualified for, and he's just like trying to figure it out. But it's this. I remember when I wrote an article, and it was about grieving, and basically I wrote an article on failure and grieving, because if I bought this horse, I trained this horse, I took this horse, I had this huge goal, I essentially am the one that got us like a penalty score of 0.
Right, yeah, it wasn't his fault.
You know, it wasn't his fault. You can't blame it on that, all this stuff. And all of this happened, and I stopped, and it was like, I went through a grieving process, and it was the first time I ever connected the dots that a grieving process could happen for more than the death of something.
Right.
And I titled it Death of a Dream.
Yes.
And as it went through the editing process, the very last time it went through the editing process, they were like, do you think that's a little harsh on the title? I'm like, no.
No, because you're right.
And
you're right.
Yeah, it was this death of this dream. And I know, like, even looking back at it now, like, I know that I can see how the editor was brave enough to ask me the question. It seems a little dramatic.
Right.
But I'm telling you, living in the moment of everything you stack up on there. But what it does is it starts to teach you either you don't want to reach out that far because you're afraid of that pain, or you realize you can live through it.
Right.
And it sucks, which I think you might have brought up about your house fire a couple times.
Yeah.
Wouldn't wish it on anybody. And yours is way more, to me, and it's funny because I want to say more real, but for me that was real.
It was, right? Yeah, yes.
And so it felt like a grieving process, but acknowledging it as a grieving process made me able to move through it, and also able to realize that, you know, I was still willing to take the risk of loving another horse and signing up for another dream and doing that. And I wonder sometimes if people aren't shut down because they're afraid of the pain.
Yes.
That they're not necessarily walking through in that grieving process and then being like, okay, I can do this again.
I think that is spot on. I mean, you know, you think of how many times, you know, we get a horse, right? And whatever's driving us behind that, you know, it's like, I've always wanted to have a horse, right? So now I get a horse, and whether I'm going to trail ride or I'm going to compete at the Congress or whatever, when you get the horse, you have all of these dreams in your mind. You have all these goals and things you want to do. I can relate to it. When I bought my paint mare, you know, I got her as a baby, and she's very well bred and as a pleasure horse. And I had in my mind, I was like, you know, she qualified for all these futurities, and I was like, oh, this could be fun, you know, because she was really cute and a great mover and all these things, and then just life was happening to me. But I think some of the reason that we never got anywhere, I mean, some of it was her physical issues. She, you know, started to have some physical issues. But the majority of the time of the first probably 6 years of her life, you know, I got her started, but then I allowed other things to prevent me from, you know, investing more time in it. But I wonder sometimes if I sort of self-sabotaged.
Limiting belief idea.
Exactly, right?
Upper
one of our other
limits.
If I sort of, because I would start thinking about that, and then these self-imposed limitations and upper limit things would come in of, oh, you know what, that's a lot of money to do that, or the big one is, I don't think I'm good enough to do it, right? And so I always was able to find all these other things. I was like, oh well, I just know I didn't have time to ride my horse this week because I was really busy, and I was busy because I was working multiple jobs and trying to start my business and all these things. But in the reality, I was avoiding. I mean, if I'm just really brutally honest with myself, I was avoiding because I didn't want to fail. I didn't want the pain of having to look at, I did all this, I invested all of this, and then the pain of having it not turn out the way I wanted it to, right? So
I have a question. Were you sneakily suspicious of that while it was happening?
No.
Or no, it was completely...
It was much later when I really started doing my own, you know, sort of personal development in order to be able to do the work I do with leadership. I had to take my own journey of self-awareness, which, was quite painful on occasion.
Yeah. So I was, it was interesting because I was coaching somebody the other day, and there must be this new thought that's like just under the surface of my brain. Like it's just under the surface. Like I haven't been able to vocalize it yet, but I could feel it.
We'll find a word for it.
We'll find it. It's going to be a whole subject. It's big. But it was something along the lines of having a series of people come. And just to get you on the same page with me, it's almost like they're doing the horse as a bucket list thing.
Yes.
I've always wanted to do this.
Right.
I'm not getting any younger.
Right.
I'm in my mid fill in the blanks.
Right.
And I really and there's something under the surface there for me that I really empathize with because I get it, but there's also something there that I'm afraid is sabotaging the very thing they want. That's what I feel. The feeling I get.
Right.
Wait, you have this look like obvious.
Because...
Could you clarify that before I go on?
I think it comes back to what you were talking about with after the thing happened with the death of a dream. And even for me, after going through the loss of my dogs, you're faced with sort of being at this fork in the road, right? One fork is, I'm going to take the safe route, so emotionally safe route, right? I'm not going to put myself out there again. In your case, I'm not gonna get another horse of that quality, and I'm not going to set a goal for myself like that, right? Mm-hmm. And in my case, the emotionally safe path for me would have been, I am not going to get another dog, because it was so painful to lose my other dogs, in the fire. And I've lost lots of dogs. I mean, I've had a lot of dogs over my life, and I've had to, put them down, and I've had it happen unexpectedly, for different things. But this one was definitely a lot more painful than any of the others, obviously. And so the safe route is emotionally, I'm not going to put myself in the situation where I might get emotionally hurt. Mm-hmm. The other path is the one that's more windy and up and down and mountains in the middle, right? So for you, at least looking at it from a recent goal, was you setting this goal for yourself with the dressage piece and going to the Western Dressage World Show. You really became vulnerable in that situation, and I think that's what we avoid. What we're trying to avoid being vulnerable, because we have a belief, a perception that being vulnerable is somehow bad, that's weakness, right? Mm-hmm. So if I prevent myself from being vulnerable, then I don't have to worry about being emotionally hurt or disappointed or whatever those things are. And so I think we absolutely self-sabotage. I mean, I did it with my horse, and because we have this thing in our head of, oh, I really want to do this. But then there's this little thing in our brain that I'm going to explore how this happens in my graduate work, I think.
Yeah.
What is it? What is that thought process that kicks in and sort of is that little, maybe it's that little voice or that little hairy thing on your shoulder going, you're not going to do that. You can't do that, or whatever. But that comes into play, and I think that's where we don't recognize it. And in order to move through it, we have to allow ourselves to be vulnerable. So in that case with the person with their horse, right? If that person really wants to move through whatever challenges they're having, they're going to have to take that hard look at what are the thoughts I'm having that are impacting the result that I'm getting, which is a whole other conversation for us to dive into with our upside down triangle. But I think that's a big piece of it and it could be a lot of different things. It could be fear of failure, but it could be fear of success. Mm-hmm. Right?
Yeah, that one's sneaky. What
happens if I'm successful in this endeavor? You know, what's going to happen?
what changes? Because it doesn't stay the same, right?
Right. I mean, if you had not taken the chance to go in to do the freestyle at the Congress all those years ago, that really, launched you. You could have very easily been like, well, what if this goes really well, and all of a sudden our life changes as a family.
That's interesting to try to weigh out which one would have been more terrifying.
Right.
And actually the only one I considered was like it going horribly bad. And I kind of accepted everything that could happen on that end.
Right.
But you don't really think about any quote unquote negative things that would happen from the success.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was kind of actually a blessing that I did that ride and it didn't go viral for 2 years afterwards.
Right.
So there was actually a lot of time to grieve and to do a bunch of other stuff before that happened. But one more thought I don't want to drop before is something along the lines of that woman asking the question about kind of that fear of not reaching a bucket list thing.
Right. Yeah.
But I think there's something to this. There's something to the idea that you can stand in a position and look at something and say you want it.
Right.
And also say, I'm choosing not to have it.
Yes.
That I don't see that. There's two things and these are kind of, I think they're flip-flop opposites, but maybe I'm wrong. So there's this idea that you could look at something and you say, I could choose to do that. And I can see a bunch of positive, but I'm still going to choose something different. I think that's a really tough place for people. And sometimes when people are like, I really like, when there's it's a scarcity feeling now that I'm saying it, like when the person has this like bucket list thing and there's this like grabby scarcity kind of a feeling towards like, I got to get it now because the time is ticking and I need to do it now. And that scarcity makes it really hard to chase it because it's kind of a grabby feeling. So maybe that's the first thing I'm reacting to. But then there's also this beauty of being able to look at something and be able to say, that'd be so cool to have that. And maybe I will and maybe I won't. And then it doesn't have that scarcity feeling. Yeah. But for some reason, this flip-flop version of it, and I've only really identified it one time in my life. We were climbing, we were down in Kentucky, and we went on this, I'm going to go air quotes, hike. We went on this hike with some college students. And FYI, like, I think everything should be done horseback. So hiking is already in the negative because it doesn't have a horse. And we were walking, and it was kind of fine. And then it turned into like, oh, well, the path is a little steep. I'm terrified of heights, by the way, again. And it's like, I'm climbing, and this just turned into like this
steep, like
now.
Really steep?
This has turned now into like we are climbing up, like belly against the ground, like root to root, like climbing. And you know what? They're like, oh, it's only like 20 feet like this. So you get up 20 feet, and no, it's not only 20 feet, but now going down is more terrifying than going up more.
I'm with you on that.
And so,
and I have to come in and get
me. At this point, I am also vulnerably honest at this point. I'm like, I am ticked that I am in this, I'm not happy that I'm in this position, but I'm also like, I'm dealing. And so we go through this, and there's another young lady with me, and she's having essentially the same reaction I am. We're both honestly scared, and we're both pushing and doing it. So we end up climbing like this, for like 18 hours, which is really probably 20 minutes. Like, felt like,
are we almost at the top of Mount Everest? Because I feel like the oxygen is getting thin.
Exactly. And so like 20 minutes later, we finally get to the top. And we had two opposite reactions. Hers was the classic movie reaction. Hers was the like, yes, I did that. I feel so empowered. I'm so grateful. And I'm like, I am glad I'm alive. And I will never do that again. I would never have chosen that. And I will never willingly do that again.
I am setting a boundary right now.
But I thought it was so interesting because we both did the same thing. We both had the same climb. But at the end of the day, when we stand at the top, I turned around because we knew each other fairly well. And I'm like, I only want to say this. You could be having that reaction really. Or you could be faking that reaction because you think you should.
Right.
Because that would be the movie ending.
Yeah.
Only you will ever know.
Right.
Only you will ever know whether or not this is your
Powerful
actual
thought.
thing. But you think about it, because if you just go into this move that you should think, you're going to block something real. Like, I am never climbing that again.
Right.
Which is fine.
Right. Oh my gosh. How often does that happen
I'm wondering.
with our horses or with us? When, you know, it's that, to me, it's that, somebody kind of making you feel like you need to get on that horse.
Exactly.
That everything in you says, this is a bad idea.
No, in that moment, what do you think you're transmitting to the horse when everything in you says that?
Right? This is, I mean, think of how often, I mean, that's a whole other piece too, right? Of everything we're transmitting non-verbally and energetically to the horse. But I mean, this whole human nature thing, right? Of why we feel like we have to set aside all of these things in us that are telling us one thing, and then do something that we totally just know isn't something that is right for us. It might be perfectly fine I got a friend who would get on any horse, and God bless him. You know, I mean, at some point in time, I think his 9 lives are going to come to an end, but there's this so much power around our thinking,
awareness,
and all of it. We're not even aware of that stuff.
Yeah,
like we're not even aware that we might be completely ignoring stuff, or we discount it.
Yeah,
we discount what we're really feeling and thinking. Why
do you think we do that? Why? Let's just take that example. Climb to the top of the hill. You had 18 hours / 20 minutes of climbing in this one motion. Why at the top of the hill? Why switch gears? Why would we do that? I haven't explored this really.
Well, I think it's the same thing. I mean, what I was talking about with when you make the decision to get on that horse, that everything in you says this is probably not a good idea, is because of our social structure, right? We don't want to be perceived.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
A certain way, right?
So the perception, if you get to the top and you do it, the better perception would be,
you're a winner. You're
strong. I'm strong.
People, right?
I succeeded.
Right.
Oh, wait,
and that's
we could
where
pull
we
out another
place
6
all
words
of our
like that.
stuff.
Succeed, an accomplishment, and yeah, okay.
Right.
So you could label that whole thing something quote unquote positive just because it would then have this top of the mountain experience, which is very classic.
Right.
But if that's not what you really experience.
Well, because to me, and I mean, you know, for some people, that might be a pivotal moment, right?
And I will totally
that person, the other person might possibly, for her, that might have been a parallel to other things, other times in her life where she's felt really scared, insecure, whatever. And climbing up that helped her realize she could kind of push through some of that fear and accomplish a goal.
Yeah.
That might be something that she carries over the next time when she's faced with some other goal that seems unattainable or seems like, oh gosh, I'm not sure about this. She may now have the courage to step into that. And that's great.
It is.
And
I might have the courage to be like, no, thank you.
Right, but that's okay because it's about what's right for you.
Yeah.
I mean,
and that is what's so unique.
I think that's the thing, and that's where, like, when you have people coming to your clinics, you know, there may be a different response. I don't know if it's just one person with you, or if it's 2 or 3 people with you, right? Because as soon as you add in some other people into the mix, outside of just like you and one other client. Right now you have other people. Now there's that whole, oh gosh, all of this stuff of what do they think about me? And, oh, I don't want them to think that I don't know what I'm doing, and all of this stuff. We go through this whole, we tell ourselves so many stories every moment of every day. And those stories are what shape how we respond to ourselves and each other. And those stories shape the decisions we make in the moment. And so, if you have someone that is telling themselves a story in order to try and convince themselves that they feel or think differently than what they actually do, they're actually creating discomfort for the horse.
Wait a minute. One of my favorite words I've had from you. Incongruence. Incongruence.
You read my mind.
Yes.
You read my mind.
Because that would be, so as long as, if we both got to the top of the mountain, and we were both congruent with each other. If my happy ending is I have an empowered no, and her happy ending is she has the ability to say, I can do more than I thought I could.
Right.
We can both be congruent. It's just watching for the incongruency of like making sure that you're not just doing the storybook ending because that's what the movies do.
Right.
Nice.
And you don't want people to see who you really are.
Right. That you could actually do that and then still not like it.
Right.
Still not appreciate it or whatever.
You put yourself out there a little bit by being congruent in that statement, because there might have been other people there who, when you got to the top, they were like, yeah, you did it, good job. But if that's not your congruence, and you step out and you go, actually, I'm just going to say that I will never do that again. And then because
it makes them uncomfortable.
Well, it does, right?
Yeah, because I didn't just fit in.
Yes, and you also kind of called them out on their assumption that you getting to the top of that was somehow going to be a celebration.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And empowerment or whatever that is. Their intention may have been genuine, right? But in reality, that's unfair for them to expect for you to get up there and say, yes, I did it, knowing that that's not congruent for you, in order to accommodate them and not make them feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
We practice incongruence regularly as human beings because we don't want other people to be uncomfortable. Because, and I experienced this a lot after the fire, because people want to ask about it, like or even people saying, how are you doing? My initial instinct just, is to say, oh, I'm doing okay.
Yeah.
Because if I tell you how I'm really feeling right in this moment, it could be very uncomfortable for you to have to hear it. Yeah. And so I'm going to be very conscientious of trying to prevent you from having to feel discomfort. And so, but because my horses demand that I am congruent all the time, and they tell me every moment when I am with them, whether I'm being congruent or not. And so I made the decision for myself to be congruent. And so when people would ask me, it's not as bad now because 6 months have gone by and I've done a lot of emotional work through this. But even still, if I'm not really doing well in the moment with something in regards particularly to that experience, and you say, oh man, how are things going with the fire, or how are things going with the house? I just look and I go, it's really horrible. Yeah. We've been through this terrible experience with the insurance company. It's taken us 6 months to be able to even get started on the house. It's been very frustrating, very disappointing. I'm just going to tell you like it is, because I need to do that for my own mental and physical well-being. Because if I'm always being incongruent in order to make you feel more comfortable, it's going to end up impacting me negatively.
Well, and what's interesting is that's, I think, what drew me to you initially when you reached out and contacted me about possibly coming to my barn to use it for one of your events.
Leadership, yeah.
And so was that every interaction we had that congruent feeling, and that is definitely something that I for sure feel and know is a key to working with the horses.
Right.
Because it's just, yeah, I mean, they show up as who they are. It's just, and it's so simple. So much more simple if you just do it. But and in the last video that I just released, it was so funny because I said I came out and for the last one of the Trail to the World show, I was at the show and I said, grab the video camera and videotape this, and I'm hosing my horse off, and I just flipped over and hosed my head off in the wash rack. And she jokingly said, I'm going to use this for blackmail, and I say, good luck, because I'm going to post it on the internet myself. So it's so much more simple, and the people that just left from a last clinic, they were like, I have to say, you're just like you are in your videos and your podcasts. Like, we just went to coffee with you and you sound exactly like you do when you're talking.
I know.
That is probably the biggest compliment I get now. Like, I am happy that, but it's also just dead simple.
It is. It is. But
what I actually was thinking on the way here, but I say it's dead simple, but here's the biggest challenge to it. You just nailed it. It is, I'm going to be me, and the discomfort comes from knowing I'm going to potentially make you uncomfortable.
Right.
like there it is.
It is. So, I know.
Yeah. And so it's not for me at this point. It's not a question of whether or not I'm going to be me. And again, that doesn't mean I'm just going to run around. I mean, to come to this place also means I've done a lot of work in other areas. So I'm not just running around being like, you made me angry, I'm going to punch you in the face.
No, that's also not really congruent to some extent. But
that's what I'm saying. But I think sometimes people hear it and they're like, oh, if I let myself be me, who, you know what I mean?
Right.
But there's a growth pattern that's come with it. And I think that's why it's important to go on the whole journey all the way through. But yeah, it's simple in that I get to be me, and it's challenging in that you have to decide what you're going to do with me. You have to decide. You have to be like, okay, she just hosed her head off, and she just, she just said that, and I don't know if I agree or not. I don't even need people to agree. I'm into conversation.
Right. Yes.
So, I'm going to learn more in the next week, and I hope I'm still growing and changing next week and next month and next year. And
I know.
Yeah.
Well, and I totally am on board with you. I mean, I think that's from the first time that we got together, because I remember the first time we came down here, they closed or something, and we were across the street sitting outside at a little table.
Yep.
And but I remember thinking of how much I appreciated that congruence, because I was like, oh, it's so comfortable for me to be with someone else who can be who's congruent and is perfectly okay with it, and there wasn't this like, oh my gosh, I don't want to make her uncomfortable kind of thing. We both came together and we were just like, this is who we are.
Yes.
Whatever happens. But here we are, 2 years later, we still coming and having these, we could probably go way longer if both of us didn't put a boundary on it in some way. But I think that's why our conversations are so organic too, right? Because there's no like methodical, oh, let's see, don't want to have that conversation, oh, I shouldn't say that or this. We both just sort of throw stuff out there and we're like, what do you think about that?
Yeah.
And we can have conversation around it. And because I think to some extent, at least to me, in a lot of our conversations, we're trying to not just figure out how do we both stay congruent with ourselves and on our journey and in our businesses, But how do we both, because we both work with clients in a little bit different aspect, right? You're working with people to help them learn how to enjoy their horses and accomplish their goals with their horses. And I'm teaching people how to be better leaders by working with the horses and learning from the horses. But we're both always trying to figure out how can we help our clients learn to be comfortable in the congruence? How can we both help our clients take the information from the horses, which is simply information, nothing, no bias, no agenda, nothing behind it. How can we help our clients take that information from the horses and do something differently from that, you know, and say, how can I use this information to move towards what I want to, and not take the information as a threat and move away from it, you know, because to me, that's something that in our conversations, when you and I are kind of exploring some of our upper limit problems and things like that, we're both trying to find a way, how do I keep moving towards what I want?
Despite all the plastic bags that are flapping around and all the scary things that we don't understand.
Yes, yeah. And so that to me is that's such a powerful mindset, you know. So when we set goals for ourselves, we've made the choice to look at things that might get in our way as information.
Yeah.
And say, okay, what am I going to do with this information? You know, I mean, I think I had shared with you one of the last times we were talking, I was like, I am totally hitting an upper limit thing right now, you know, with my business. And, but I recognized that it was just information. And then I thought, okay, so how do I keep moving towards what I want, as opposed to this information is kind of making me uncomfortable, and so I'm going to try to move away from it. And so that to me, I think, is a big part of, you know, when we're looking at our goals, whether it's with our horses or in other parts of our life, is really recognizing that when we become uncomfortable, that's the point of potential growth. Right? Because every time you and I have had conversations around whichever one of us is, you know, looking at some upper limit issue that we're having, it's like, oh, this is so uncomfortable. This is so uncomfortable. And I really would like to just walk away from it and go back to just keep doing things the way I have been doing, or even though that's not helping me achieve what I want to, that's not moving me towards my goal, but it's comfortable.
Yeah. Known.
Right? Certain. That's that certainty. I know over here I can feel certainty. I can feel safe in that space, even though it's not getting me to where I want to go. Right? But if we can shift, and this is where I think, you know, you and I are really trying to figure out, how do we help our clients be able to see that and to be open to, okay, well, this is what the horse is telling me. I'm going to set aside all of the story that I'm telling myself about it and how my horse is this or that, right? My horse is stubborn. My horse doesn't want to do this. My horse is whatever. Take the information and go, okay, so what can I do with this information? What can I do differently? And it might be a little uncomfortable for me to step into whatever that is to do differently. But I'm going to look at it as, if I do something differently, it's going to move me closer to my goal, as opposed to moving me back away from it. Because then what happens is we go back into that place of comfort. And I mean, this happened to me with my mare. I would go back into my place of comfort, and then I would beat myself up.
That was comfortable.
Right? Right? I would be like, oh my gosh, I'm a failure, and I can't, you know, why do I keep doing, why am I doing this, and why can't I just go ride my horse? And so then I get self-talk.
That's so perfect, because that's exactly the same phrases when I'm trying something new. say them all again. Oh my, why am I doing this? What am I?
Like, I'm a failure.
Literally same words on both sides. Same words when you withdraw and you don't try, as when you stick your neck out there and you do.
Right.
Because odds are, you know what? When you stick your neck out there and try something new, you know what's going to happen? It's not going to go well.
Right. But then you have information that you can learn from.
Exactly.
But if you don't step out into it, if you withdraw, you shortchange yourself.
Same pain. Same phrasing.
Same pain. Yes.
Literally, you just said the same words that were in my mind. Like, I'd be standing dressed in dressage gear, trying to lead my horse into the arena with all of these rules that I know I don't know. I literally, all I know is I don't know the rules.
Right? And you have a pretty good feeling things might not turn out the way that you would like them to.
Yeah, but that's so fascinating that you just said the same words when you were talking about pulling back. That literally is the same, but you're right, I end up with new information.
Right.
Because when they ring the bell and they tell you don't do that.
And so what happens, is then you walk away from that and you go, all right, so now I know. Now you've created a new connection in your brain so that now the next time you go, your brain goes, hey, remember when they rang the bell and that was uncomfortable because you felt embarrassed? Don't do that again.
Yeah.
You know? But we expend so much energy trying to avoid those feelings.
And here's the other rub I'm going to put on that is that, and you just said the energy we expend. Here's the interesting thing is I'm having trouble recovering. I expended a ton of energy doing something good.
Yes.
But I also recognize you could expend a ton of energy avoiding doing anything.
Yes. Why not expend the energy moving towards than spending it moving away?
Maybe it's important to note that, like, tiredness is real.
It is, yes.
You know, because, like, I'm going to use this again, like, I need a better word, but I'm trying to force myself to relax. Can anybody else hear the problem here? Right. Like, I probably need to
believe that's called an oxymoron of forcing yourself to relax. But I totally get it.
Yeah, because it's like, I need to allow this recovery time, and actually the easiest way for me to do that is when I look at the horses and I go, they need some recovery also, physically, from the physical output. Right. But I think there's mental there.
I think there's I was just going to say that. I mean, there was a lot of mental expectation put on your horses throughout this whole summer of preparing to go to the Western Dressage World Show. You know, of all those experiences of going to all the different horse shows and you know, sometimes you had some challenges with, you know, sometimes when they were separated and you were having to work, that was a lot of emotional stuff for your horses as well. But all of that, I mean, every time you're taking your horses out of their comfort zone, right, and putting them on the trailer and you're taking them somewhere, you're asking them to step into uncertainty. I think it's only fair that we do the same thing, that we're willing to step into the uncertainty and go, you know what? I'm going to take a chance. I'm going to trust that I have the skills to be able to work through this. And you know what? It's okay if it doesn't look like this perfect framed thing that you could take a picture
at any moment and it would look balanced.
Right? Those are the pictures we post on Facebook so that everyone thinks we have our stuff together and everyone thinks we're in balance, you know. I will share that I have videos of myself in the months, particularly in the days, weeks right after the fire, but even a couple of months after the fire. I have some videos sort of my own in my diary that maybe someday I will post, but they're pretty raw.
Yeah.
You know, I didn't post those on Facebook. You know, on Facebook I post the like, hey, just kind of want to keep everybody in the loop. You know, here's what's going on, and you know, we're really pushing through this. And I'm being congruent when I'm in those. Like, I'm not doing a video and saying, you know, we're doing okay. Here's what's happening. I did those videos when I was feeling congruent in it.
This is so key because I was actually just thinking, because I do video and I do podcasts and I do all these different things, so my voice and my face and stuff is out there in a lot of different ways. And I was looking at it, and my brain will offer me some interesting thoughts. And one of
as brains do.
And one of them was, you sound a bit like a crazy person all over the place. But you're right. In the moment, I'm congruent. And like,
That's right.
if I'm congruently tired when I'm filming this one, I'm going to sound a certain way.
That's right.
And if I'm super wound up and excited, then I sound a different way. And if somebody wants to line up, 6 different ones and like then judge me across the board as being like, all over the place, I'm like, I guess that'll happen. But it's interesting that my brain can offer that up as a, oh no, like, and I'm like, okay, thank you, brain, but that was all of it was real. All of it was real. It was all real when it was happening. And Death of a Dream was the right title for that back then. If I was writing that story today, it wouldn't feel as dramatic because I'm removed from it so many years. The lessons would stick.
Right.
But some of the emotion would be turned down a little bit more. But I just have to trust that whoever read that at the time or sees it wherever, like that it resonates with people because everybody goes through these emotions.
You do. And I think it's really important to not discount them. I see emotions as information. Mm-hmm. If I'm feeling something, I'm going to pay attention to it and be like, why am I feeling this way? Why am I, what's triggering me to have this positive or negative emotion? Because I pay attention to the stuff that triggers me to feel good too. Yeah. It triggers me to feel positive thoughts and move me in a direction like, hey, this is really good. I'm going to keep doing this. Mm-hmm. I don't just focus on being triggered by negative stuff, and so I think it is important to pay attention to those things. But you chose to acknowledge what you were feeling from that experience when it happened. And then you again chose to step back into the arena, and be like, okay, that was information. It didn't feel good. It felt uncomfortable. It was not something that I really, if I could have made a choice, I would have liked to have not had to experience that. But had you not experienced that, you may not have grown to where you did, right? And I mean, that's a big thing I think about a lot with the fire is how can I grow from this experience? And I mean I've grown tremendously because it's taught me to really be present all the time. It's taught me to not take things for granted even more. So, I mean, I've never been someone who took things for granted because, I've had a lot of life experiences but in particular, this one really, I mean, that's part of what drove me to go ahead and step into saying yes to grad school. I had applied 2 years ago and gotten accepted, and I said no because I had all kinds of upper limit problem stuff going on.
Yeah.
But this time I was like, I think this is really something, I know this is something I want to do, and I'm not going to say no to it because I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, and I don't want to spend another 2 years going online every now and then seeing something about this program, this grad program, or even thinking about it in my own business of, man, I really wish I had done that grad program. I think that would really be helpful to me in my business and my coaching work. But this time I decided to do it for me because the other thing is when I applied 2 years ago is that some of it was I wanted to do it because I thought that it would somehow increase my status with other people in my field or in the field of leadership development or whatever. So there was incongruence around it, right? I wasn't really being congruent at that point in time about why I wanted to do the program, why I wanted to go back to school, because I need another school loan. But this time it felt so congruent, and I think that's had a big role in why, I'm just finishing up my 4th week of school. So I don't know, I've still got a lot, still got 12 more months to go. But I think because I'm very congruent in why I'm doing it, that it seems really easy. And the reason I share that is because I think about what you were talking about with with your clients, or having a client, you know, who's like in the scarcity mindset, right? And, oh, I need to do this. And is that really congruent? Because being in that mindset of, I'm not doing this because I really want to do it, and I'm okay with whatever happens from it, that is going to prevent them from really stepping into the experience with the horse and really learning from the horse and learning to enjoy it. Because it's a task. It's like, this is a check thing I need to check off my list.
Yes.
And that was kind of how I was looking at grad school 2 years ago. This time, I'm doing it for me because I have a genuine curiosity and passion for trying to understand why we do the things we do, and being able to take that into organizations, because I'm really passionate about organizations operating differently and understanding that you have tasks to complete in order to achieve your strategy, but there's people involved in that. And that's really what's happening for people with their horses. When you set a goal with your horse,
it's task oriented. That's what people, I think, avoid it.
Right. So you have a task, you have a goal, but you have another living, thinking being involved with you in that. So it's you and the horse both are going through the experience together.
Yeah. And get this, like, people will avoid setting the task. And I'm just going to use the World Show because we have been. They'll avoid setting something like that, like a goal, because it's going to automatically turn into, it's easy to check it out as tasks.
Right.
There's like, it's very achievable. It lines out well, which is the very thing that makes it move you forward. But then people will come and they'll say, I don't want to show, I don't want to put that kind of pressure on myself or on my horse.
Right.
But you can't avoid being together and developing some kind of a language. You either have a map where you're headed somewhere or you don't, but what happens is they go try to just be.
Right.
And it lasts for a little while, but the horse has all these different questions, and if the handler doesn't have any answers for it because they don't really have any clarity on what is going on aside from being with you, well, the horse is like, I can be with you and I can go back to the barn. I can be with you and I can eat the grass. I can be with you and I don't want to be with you. I think I'll go be with my friend.
Right.
What are you going to do with that? And if you're just kind of like, I don't know what to do with that, then the horse is like, okay. I'll make a plan.
I'm going to do it then.
I'll make a plan then. Yeah. And so you don't avoid these conversations of developing a relationship with a horse. You don't avoid it by avoiding the tasks. You just become, the horse is the one that sets the tasks.
Right.
The horse is the one the horse starts setting it by, so you're either being proactive in the way that you're doing it, or you're being reactive to what the horse does. Like, you know, the horse is like, what are you going to do with this one? They're like,
well, because the horse is trying to figure out the relationship.
Yes. Yeah, that's all.
What is this relationship here? And if you're not leading, then I guess I have to do it.
Yeah.
If you enjoy listening to Stacy's podcast, please visit stacywestfall.com for articles, videos, and tips to help you and your horse succeed.